Oh,
We are now live.
we are now live.
Hmm. I am now remembering I forgot to turn over my laundry.
Orshi, you're the host, by the way. Did you like stop the ping?
Yes, we are recording now,
Yes.
and people are supposed to be able to join. Also,
Okay.
I don't have a slide, but I think you have a good agenda.
We don't need a slide. I was
Okay.
just asking.
Um,
Ooh, we have attendees coming.
so I don't have to let them in; they can just join, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they're
Good.
getting in.
Oh yeah, I see. Hello.
Yeah. Hello to everybody just joining. We're gonna hang around for a couple of minutes to wait for more people to join us, and then we're gonna get into all of the fun of the International Activities Fund. And other project funding. That's important.
You forgot to put the Zoom information in the Google Calendar invite, so I can't get into the Google Hangout because my Chrome's not working, but could someone go and check and make sure people aren't there and direct them to join this?
Yes, I can do that.
Yeah, I couldn't edit that. So that's
So
why
I'm
I
gonna
sent it
put
out in
my
the email. Can you hear now, Maya? Hey, Rachel.
Hi.
Yeah, we're just waiting around for a couple of minutes for more people to potentially join. But
Cool.
I think the latest we're gonna start at 35. Is that okay with everyone?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Rachel, is Carmen meant to be joining as a panelist? No.
No, I think she's just attending just this session.
I just talked to Carmen. She was in the Hangouts.
Oh, the
Is there anyone
Hangout
else there?
instead of the Zoom. Okay. Could someone send her the Zoom link? I'm like,
Yeah, I just did.
okay, cool. I have like a million windows open because I'm trying to get out the UN CND rescheduling email blast.
Rachel, because my Chrome isn't working, I can't get a picture of Orshi right now. But maybe Orshi, you can send Rachel a headshot.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay, do you think we're good to start? Yeah, so welcome everybody to the Strategy Summit session on the International Activities Fund and project funding, where we're going to be discussing sustainable project funding for chapters and national networks and how we can make that a reality. So the idea behind this session was to explore all of the potentials in redesigning how we source funding for our chapters, and our goal is to figure out ways that are accessible, sustainable, transparent, and give an equal opportunity for everybody to take part in campaigns, maybe global campaigns, um, and other programmatic activities, especially global initiatives. And with this, I think we're mainly thinking of chapters who might not receive enough funding from their campus, their universities, or don't really have any access to outside funding that they might need to implement these activities. So the way that we're going to do this today is Jake and Roisin are going to give us an introduction of the previous practices of SSDP and kind of a history and an evaluation of what the International Activities Fund is or was, how it worked, what features of it worked and what didn't. And then we're gonna go into questions and comments right after that. It would be great if some previous beneficiaries joined and could chime in. And then we're gonna hand it over to Rachel for a reality check on how IAF and potential project funding could fit into the larger picture of SSDP funding. And then we're going to move into open discussion and ideas on how, on what we can do based on what these amazing individuals are going to tell us. So without further, I'm going to hand it over to Jake and Roisin, if that's okay to you. Yeah, thank you.
Totes. Yeah, I guess Roisin, I can start off by so I was asked to kind of come on here and just give a general overview of the history of the International Activities Fund, why we started it, and sort of just an overall evaluation of what went well, what didn't go well, some of the problems that we had, some of the successes that we had, and kind of just paint the picture for why this fund was developed and what it was intended to do and whether or not it did those things when we started during my last year on staff. So the IAF was really kind of several years in the making, and it was really a response to two huge problems we had with the global program. First off, we were no longer receiving any money from Open Societies Foundation, which had previously been funding most of our global program activities, specifically conference scholarships and global training, such as our Bangkok convening, which we did in January, some CND travel. We were really relying very heavily on OSF for all of our international funding and other sources of funding as well, even if they weren't giving us all that much. And when we were no longer getting OSF funding around like 2017, 2018, it left us with a huge problem because we did not have enough of a budget or money on our own to provide international travel scholarships at the level that people needed. Obviously in the US, people sometimes only need $100, $150 to attend the conference. That's not possible, obviously, if someone's coming from Africa or from Europe, where flights can be over $1,000. So that was one of the biggest things that we were really trying to do, is try to create some self-sustaining funding for chapters to attend conferences. But the other thing it was trying to do as well was kind of solve this major issue that SSDP had, and probably still does have, where we just weren't offering a great program of resources to our chapters outside the United States. Our care packages contain very US-centric materials outside the stickers. We didn't really have much on our website that was offering much guidance to people outside of a US context. And even when we were giving advice on things like chapter fundraising, our advice was kind of centered around, oh, well, try to get money from your school, try to raise money on your own. And these are things which may seem achievable, yes, difficult, but achievable in the US, but really are not in a lot of international contexts. So it felt like for a while, we didn't really know what we were offering our international chapters besides staff time. Aside from talking to me and occasionally someone else on staff, there really wasn't much that SSDP was able to give our international chapters because there just wasn't simply one, enough money to create the kind of resources that they were asking for, and two, there just doesn't seem to be much of a, really, to be honest, an effort to meet those needs at the time as well. So the IF was really created to kind of solve those two problems and try to bridge this gap between the lack of resources and the lack of really anything that SSDP was providing the international chapters at the time. So when we initially designed it, we designed the IF as a independent fund, which would be funded through a fundraising campaign that would take place over a month, and the money that we would raise during this dedicated fundraising campaign would go towards three specific things. It would go towards SSDP conference scholarships, it would go towards micro grants for chapter activities, and it would go towards CND travel or other UN events. That was the initial idea, and our goal was to raise $10,000 that first year, which we actually exceeded. I think we raised $15,000 that first year, although most of it did come from, I think, one single donor.
Yeah. It came from, most of it came from a handful of cannabis industry donors who are in the United States who are particularly interested in our international work. We raised most of it at an event we held in San Francisco, I believe, in conjunction with ArcView, our esteemed trustees who have a cannabis industry investor forum that give us space to give a pitch to folks in a room at a happy hour. So we were able to talk about our international work, and people really are into it. And we raised that money then from just a handful of folks.
Yep, exactly. Thank you, Rachel. So we got that money raised, got more than we anticipated, and so then came time to actually put it into practice. And here's where things got a little bit complicated. I don't want to, throw any old staff members under the bus or anything like that. That's not what I'm here to do. But there was very much a disconnect after the money was raised between what it was supposed to be spent on. I was pretty clear when we were developing the IAF, and I think we were all in agreement at the time that this fund was for conference scholarships, micro grants, and CND. And even CND was sort of like if there's money left over, we can do that as well. After we had the money, I was told that this was going towards staff time, and this was going towards funding the global fellow salaries, which I had to be under the impression we were going to be funding, irregardless of the IAF. So that was one of the first kind of big disconnects, is just sort of a general lack of consensus around what this even was. Was it the IAF part of a larger budget? Was an IAF an independent budget for the global program? There was just a lot of confusion around that right off the bat. But we kind of cleared things up, and I think the thing that worked really well in that first year of the IAF, more than anything else, was the micro grant program. Getting small amounts of money to chapters to organize events which they would have not been able to do otherwise because they couldn't get money from their schools or couldn't raise that money on their own. When I say micro grants, we did not reward anything more than $1,000, and I think even then we really kept things to 500 or below. I think maybe only one or two projects got funded above that 500 amount. One of which was the Dublin City University General Assembly. Shout out to Rasheen. Just as an example of some of the awesome activities we were able to do, some students in Bolivia were able to travel to Mexico City for a conference on indigenous farming and drug use, which was really fantastic. Ghana was able to hold a national open forum in which they had pretty good media attendance. I think over 100 people there overall. And SSDP Belarus was able to host 6 regional trainings across the country and onboard regional chapter leaders to help with national campaigning as well. And that also got some pretty good media attention and was particularly impressive given the political situation in Belarus at the time and still today. So I think there were maybe like 8 or 9, maybe even 10 total chapter projects funded through the IAF, and all of them were really fantastic to see, and definitely succeeded in that goal of trying to meet the needs of international chapters when they weren't previously being met through this funding. So that was definitely the biggest success of the IAF. In terms of things which didn't work, conference scholarships were still way underfunded. And that kind of became clear after we started doing the micro grants that we just weren't going to have enough money that we were anticipating to do conference scholarships the way we wanted to. And so that ultimately kind of resulted in us doing what we had been doing already and giving small amounts to international chapters, but ultimately just wasn't enough to bring the kind of global involvement we wanted to chapters at the conference at the time. Also considering the fact that we were still dealing with the whole visa issue and people getting denied that way too. we did not have any money left over for CND funding or anything like that, which was already kind of like a, like I said, and if we have money left over, we'll do that. But we didn't really have anything for that. I think one of the micro grants might have gone to SSDP Vienna to do some activities around CND. So we had a little bit there, but that was more covered under the micro grant program. And I think, kind of as Rachel alluded to and sort of what I alluded to as well, we didn't really succeed in creating any kind of self-sustaining fund because that money was raised by a handful of cannabis industry people over the course of one event. And there was really not much of a mechanism for continuing that funding beyond that when it ran out, aside from trying to do it again the next year. So in terms of trying to create self-sustaining funding for the global program, the IEF did not really achieve that. There was also kind of on the micro grants, like I said, I think the micro grants was the most successful part of the program. There was an issue there too in terms of transferring money as well, where money was definitely lost in the transfer. It's very difficult to transfer money to places like Africa, to places like Southeast Asia, not just because of transaction fees, but because payment options are severely limited. For instance, in Nigeria, you can't use PayPal, which is what we were using for a lot of other places to avoid fees. So we never really solved that problem of how do we account for transaction fees, exchange rates? Does that get built into the cost of a budget? Do we incur those costs? That was never kind of really figured out. So I guess overall, after that first year, I would definitely have considered it a success in terms of we met one of the major things we were trying to set out to do, and that is bridge this lack of resources for international chapters. And we, I think, really funded a lot of fantastic events with that as well. But what the IF did not do was create self-sustaining funding for the global program. And I think conference scholarships are something which maybe we placed a lot more importance on back then, which maybe aren't as important, obviously, now anyway. But even that too, we were not able to kind of bring in the people to the conference that we wanted to as well. And obviously, like I said, we weren't able to fund CND stuff. So I mean, I guess my overall summary was I thought it was a great success for the first year. I wish that we could have found a way to keep that funding going and really maybe make it more focused on that micro grant kind of chapter resources idea rather than the other things as well, because that really seemed to be the need it was serving at the time too, while also recognizing as well that, the global program was growing, there was a need for staff salaries, and that if we were raising money for the global program, we had to be cognizant that money had to go there too. So when I left staff, that was kind of where things were at. We recognized that this was a good program. We wanted to continue it, but we were unsure how we would keep funding it, and we were unsure where the funding priorities would be in terms of staff time and micro grants and stuff like that too. So happy to answer questions, or if Roisin, you have anything to follow up on that. But yeah, that's just pretty much my take on it.
Yeah, I can explain kind of how it went from when I joined the team a little bit. It was a little different to Jake's experience, because I think that kind of dissonance between what had originally been envisioned for the fund and the ideas of maybe some people in leadership at the time had really at that point been really exaggerated. I don't know if there was just certain perceptions about how the fund had gone that maybe that got worse. But when I was brought onto staff, I was told the fund was almost explicitly for paying for salaries, and that kind of laughed off because we would never raise that, which it was a problem for me because I had received the fund the previous year. So I come in very excited, but I was also hired I think it was a week or two or maybe 3 weeks before the month where we were meant to be fundraising for the IAF. And was just told get some stories and blog posts, and being the first time I had ever done that, was I kind of lacked the ability to be able to do that in any meaningful way. And then because nobody ever talked to me about it again, I just assumed that now we have $15,000. I know it seems silly, but just no one ever talked about it again. So then when I came to ask for money, I was told there was none, or I was told there was $5,000, but no way I could access that or use it. And I was also met with, at that time, I was meeting the African network for the first time for the most part. I think I had maybe spoken to Clement or Williams once before, but like this was like me coming into this space and hearing the desperate need for project funding. I think I want to give like a little bit of insight for people who might not understand how important project funding is, in particular for the African network, because doing drug policy reform is it is far more taboo. It just is. And we're going to have to get over that in our minds, because it means you need a certain level of resources and to be able to do it with like at least some level of safeness around you while you're doing. You need to be able to book a room, and you need to be able to, actually have that space. It's not the same way as it is in, Western Europe or in North America, where you can just like set up a table at your college and start doing a thing. You need to actually have that. You need to have certain levels of establishment and things to be able to actually access it. So it's important when we're talking about getting project funding that we're not just thinking about funding people's ideas of things they want to do. We're also funding the legitimacy of some of our members. And like, that's what we need to do, because, for some people doing this type of work is, dangerous and not necessarily dangerous, but like very threatening to your kind of security in how you live and the way your family and your friends and your school might treat you. So like we have to recognize that and be respectful of that. And like if we want that movement to actually grow in these areas, this is where we need to invest. So yeah, and that's what I was kind of learning all that for the first time then. And yeah, it just became more and more obvious to me, especially as like it was so clear that nobody was going to get a visa for the conference or for reform that year. That we needed to massively deprioritize the conference as a viable option. And like I was still trying and people still wanted me to, but like, it became really, really clear that we were wasting money and energy, and we were getting people's hopes up for something that wasn't going to happen. And really, if we had spent all the money we had spent on denied visas and just giving them as micro grants, I feel like the level of impact we could have had would have been way stronger. So like that's what I kind of came into. Now since then there has been a lot of discussion amongst the team around how we can prioritize this type of funding, and I'm sure Rachel will talk about this a little bit. But like, I know I've just like kind of ranted in a very negative way, but like I'm just like letting you know, like that's what kind of happened last year, but it is going to improve greatly. And that's what this conversation is for. So I think it's really important that we have this conversation and we get our priorities straight on where we want to spend money.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Jake and Roisin. You raised some very, very important points. I would like to like stop for a little bit and just open the floor to see if anybody has questions or comments. You can put it in the chat or the Q&A, or I don't know what we have, or you can raise your hand and we can give you access to speak.
Or you'll have to give access to speak because you're the host.
Yeah, Clement's hand is up.
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm not too sure if you can hear me.
Yep.
Awesome. Yeah. I think I figured out this particular session is very, very important. So I kind of like pinned it that I have to be here definitely because it has actually played a huge role in terms of getting the work of SSDP going. Money speaks the language of the capitalist society. Money speaks the language of, our leaders. Once there's money, we'll be able to click any ads that you want to click actually. And for we actually in Africa, that has actually been a very huge problem as far as our work is concerned. And I love the point. I love the point that Roisin raised a lot. It means now people are beginning to appreciate what the context of the situation is, and there's actually going to be a deliberate effort towards prioritizing funding, especially for those in the in Africa or the global south. And one thing that I would just want to add is that especially since you have some staff here, whatsoever effort that you want to put in place towards supporting the work of our chapters in terms of financial I think for me, I have got for where I have been as a board member and actually been in SSDP, I have gone to appreciate the fact that there's no money, and that's the honest truth. However, with my colleagues down here in Africa, the fact that SSDP is associated with like an international tag, like from the US or from Europe, people already perceive that there's enough funding. So there's that expectations already from people, and when they start getting involved and they realize that that is not how it is, and they have to try and make some personal commitment on their own, then they tend to fall back. I give a critical example of SSDP Ghana. I think one of our huge unmotivation from people has become the issue of funding. Over the past years, we've been funding most of our activities by ourselves. And I think it's because also we had like leadership that were a bit financially stable. For instance, the SSDP Ghana National President, Mr. Ansa, who is working and he understood the work, and some way sometimes too, he joins resources to make the work happen. But then there is a work that is for young people, it is for the students. And if we get to the point where now the students would need to make financial commitment, especially in our part of the world, they would definitely draw back. So I think priority should be given. Now it is so obvious that it is not easy for people in Africa to access the global north. So issues about prioritizing like visa should be way cut down now. So instead of like, I'm a huge beneficiary of reimbursement of visa, which at a point I realized that it's crazy. That about that amount of money that we spend on visa reimbursement can organize a mini forum where we can just book a place where we can have some small snack and invite people, talk to them, and get a program going instead of just spending it on visa reimbursement because of a system that has been created that has disallowed some of us. So I think moving forward, we should prioritize how our spending is, acknowledging the fact that we have limited resources and we should just manage with it. I mean, it's very obvious. Our part, the motivation has been huge, and I'm hoping that people's motivation, excitement to rise again, and we wouldn't also give. I think the mistake we've also done is that we're giving people too much expectations from SSDP. But there's a time you're getting very real with people that this work is a voluntary service. This work, it takes passion. It's passion over resources. So if you are in, it's not because you are always going to get free t-shirt to wear and join us. You're always going to get like free other stuff that no, we don't have that money. And it's happened in our last support Don't Punish. We had to make people pay for their t-shirts, and the few people who could, they did. And those who couldn't, they dropped out. So just imagine we are losing the energy and we are losing people because of fun. So yeah, I'm talking too much, but this is a bit of what I wanted to add. Let's prioritize our spending and let's know where they need it much, especially in our global south or in Africa. And CND has said it all. Look at the CND voting. It's crazy. It's crazy. And it's because of money. Russia, sorry to say, but Russia and this other country and China had huge influence on the vote of our African representative. And it's because of money. So yeah, let's start speaking their language of money. Thank you.
Thank you, Clement. Great as always. I think you raised a lot of very important points, especially like what really stood out to me was the disconnect between what people expect from SSDP and what SSDP provides, and I think we also need to look into ways to like bridge that disconnect. But yeah, snaps to Clement. And thank you. Does anybody have any questions or comments on what we covered so far? Oh yeah, we have a hand up. So Orshi, please.
I'm trying, but I'm also taking notes. Wait.
I know.
I'm gonna lower Clement's hand first, and then Evelyn.
Yeah, thank you.
Evelyn, you're muted. Okay, now we
Yeah, hello everyone. Hello everyone. Can you hear me?
Hi, we can hear you. You have the floor.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I also think that as we are deliberating on these issues, it is very important for SSDP International to have a plan, a yearly plan, where you can actually tell us maybe your budget and then the areas that you want to touch within a specific year, the goals, the aims, objective, and then based on that, the quota that you are able to grant, so that the chapters, the other nationalities can also plan based on whatever you have given, so that we can work within the budget to, in order for us to achieve whatever we are planning to achieve. I believe that when we do that, it will help all of us, so that at a point in time, a chapter knows that this is what is available to me and this is what I can do. So based on whatever goals and aspiration that we have for the year or within a specific frame of time, and then knowing whatever amount is available to us, we can just work around it and then make sure that whatever impact that we wish to achieve, we do it. So I think it's very important that some of these things, especially budget allocation, it's one of the key factor that we need to consider here. Yes, Clement was talking about the fact that sometimes money becomes issue, and then the leadership at the forefront will have to come in. Yes, if we know our budgets and we know what SSDP International has allocated for each chapter or the each country, I think we'll be able to work within our budget and then we'll even achieve more. So I think it's very important that we look at it that way as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was really great. Would anybody like to reply to that or any additional comments?
Good. I like what you were saying. I think there are some elements of the suggestion that we could implement. I remember that before Jake left, we were talking about kind of creating like an advocacy kind of overall strategy, or we didn't have anything specific, but we were saying that if we build a campaign around something like support on punishment, there is a core message and like best practices, or maybe it was with Roisin because I feel like she's nodding more. But anyway, to pretty much give more directions as to what action you can take that helps you achieve the overall mission of the organization. Yeah.
I would add to that as well. So when we were doing the micro grants and asking people to apply for micro grants, that process we had like an application form that people went through. So they weren't just submitting a budget, they were kind of noting which issues in drug policy reform their event was touching on, how their event would act on those issues, whether they were educational, whether they were advocacy, whether they were monitoring and evaluation. We also asked, I think, how it would be tied to the CAT and kind of use that framework as well. And I think importantly to this conversation too, we asked people to produce project summaries as well that went into their view on what went well with their event, what didn't go well, and what it's going to set up for the future as well. So that was a big part of it too, in the original too, was that these events that we would be funding wouldn't just be like one-off chapter events. They would be things that could help build a chapter and help contribute to a broader campaign that it had going on. And Evelyn and I think Clement kind of said it as well, that a very crucial part of that is having that year-long plan and having sort of a broader vision of what these events and what these resources are contributing to. So that was definitely part of the original intention, although definitely, I will say, I'll be the first one to say that we got definitely a little bit lax with that as things kind of move forward.
Yeah, I think the thing that Orji was touching on, we were talking about like, if we did have project funding again, right, that it would be my preference that if we did set an agenda And like maybe not for the entire network, but maybe if we were like ask the African Committee or whoever something, and like that we could have a like we want to fund X, Y, and Z in Africa, and this is like our attitude for this is what we want to work on this year. Like this is the African continent's priorities, and like have the African continent decide that and that sort of thing, and then maybe do the same for Europe, and to be able to like have a bit of consistency, because I think in terms as well of impact, the more people we have doing of similar area in like working in a similar area, the better. Because it's kind of more akin to the movement style than like the individualistic chapter style that we so often kind of revert to.
If I might just jump in really quickly. So there's a couple of things that are being mentioned here, which are kind of overlapping, but also might in effect end up being separate. So one would be kind of the top-down organizational initiatives, and hopefully if there was like a specific budget for types of initiatives we had for a year. And then alternatively, there's the more so setting intended goals and also giving more so regional autonomy for people to choose their own initiatives, what's important to them, where they are, and then us having the money to provide that. So these, and the reason why I say these are kind of two different things is they might end up being different based on how we get our funds. So for example, if we found a grant, well, actually, let me back up. I don't know a situation in which the SSDP International would know their budget for the year necessarily beforehand and then be able to allocate money, except for if we were able to get a grant that was for a specific purpose. So for example, we've spent the last few days looking at different European Union grants, and some of them, which you can apply for, are for specific projects, like a conference that brings people together, like specific initiatives, like engaging with governmental procedures or something, or doing on the ground advocacy or something like this. So in the case that we were to apply and get funding for this, then this would be a situation which say, okay, SSDP International has this much money, maybe dedicated to this region, depending on the grant, and for this period of time. And then we could take, and in this situation, we'd know how much money we would have for specific purposes in like a yearly period. And alternatively, hopefully, this can also be supplemented by having more sustainable budgets that would be able to go into project funding in general. So if we had another budget that was more closer to, like Jake, what you were introducing before with the micro grants, where we have just a general budget, when we're like, okay, this is to fund particular projects. And on this side, we can choose, like, as an organization, what is our priority this year or whatever. But this would also give more flexibility for different regions, different chapters to have their own initiatives. So we might end up in a situation based purely on how we're able to get our funds, which I presume we're also probably getting to pretty soon in this conversation, where we might have a fixed budget for a region or a fixed budget for a project, and then can communicate this beforehand. But this is very, very much up in the air depending on how we got our money. And preferably, if that were to happen, we'd also have a budget to do more ad hoc projects where people could propose projects that wouldn't necessarily be limited to the scope of a given donor-based budget. So this is something to keep in mind, where the different circumstances in which we'd know in advance the funds we have or the types of activities that could be specifically funded.
Yeah, thank you for that, Jacob. I think that's a very valid point, and yeah. Luis's comment in the chat, I think is kind of related to this, or it made me think that this could be similar. So just to read that really quickly, Luis said that we can do regionally specific micro grant pools and be transparent about how much is allocated for that. Would allow the chapters / coordinated regions to effectively create their own budget within the overall amount we are able to provide. It sounds like a good structure to me. It doesn't solve the issue that Jacob raised about if we don't know how much money we have, how do we allocate that? And with that, I think we're kind of moving into the reality check part of that. So I'm gonna hand over to Rachel to ground us.
Hi, everyone. Okay, so I'll say how much we have currently allocated into the International Activities Fund. This is from what we raised in July, and also like was just left over from the previous year. It's $4,185.80. And right now that could just pretty much cover CND scholarships, right? I think we have a little bit over $5,000 budgeted for that. And so okay, a couple things. Well, I think that because, you know, the money that was raised in the International Activities Fund since it was launched in 2018, so much was eaten up of it for visas and for conference scholarships. And like, I think we all agree here that that's not the best use of that money when like our international conference has had so much like US based content, right? Is it useful to fly people to the United States for our conference when it's not helping them mobilize on the ground, like in their own communities? I don't think so. I think that the microgrants program of it was the most successful. And I agree that's how we should move forward. As far as like allocating in the budget, I know SSDP International does not have like any real like funding stream or like revenue stream yet, right? And is just like we're fiscally hosting you folks. And so in our budget, when we do our FY 2021 budget, we absolutely can allocate like a certain amount of money just for microgrants, just as the International Activities Fund. And obviously we can continue to raise money for that, but I think like we can just set a budget for that for you folks for microgrants. I think that's the best way to create more, just to provide more resources, regional autonomy, and yeah, Louise says budgets are based on anticipated expenses, not anticipated income, right? So we create a budget where we anticipate our expenses and then we raise money for that budget, right? And so it's right off the bat, we can't promise to everybody like, oh, like we're going to be able to, fund all these things for you, but once we can set a budget and raise money for that budget, and then we can provide microgrants to folks. So, right now, the budget for SSDP International is, Luis and I just recently revised it and we set it, but we definitely want to set aside more fund. We can set aside much more funding next year for grants, for microgrants. Additionally, also to put on regional conferences as well. I think that's like, much more beneficial, much more useful, and also significantly cheaper. If we move away from international conferences, which is like what the consensus is at this point, for a variety of factors, hosting multiple regional conferences is far less than hosting an international conference, which takes about $80,000. And the year that we hosted regional conferences, including one in Europe for the first time, it was like a third of that. And so just by saving money from removing the international conference from our budget, like we couldn't like just set aside money for project funding. And I think, I don't know what our revenue is going to look like for this year. Obviously, like the recession has been pretty rough here in the US. I know, it's globally there's a recession, but it's particularly rough in the United States. And that's where the majority of all of our funding comes from the United States, all of it. Yeah, so, I don't know what revenue is going to look like. We have a goal of like $419,000 this year. And, we're hoping if we come in over revenue, we can move that into the reserves. But yeah, for the next budget, we can just set aside much more money for microgrants. Like that's not an issue. And we could totally work on that with the next executive director and like absolutely, advocate for that. Like, Roisin, Luis, and I will advocate for that to the next executive director. And also like we're all responsible for working on the budget together anyway. That's how it's supposed to work at S2E. So yeah, that's definitely something we can work on. And then as far as like future funding, once like the year passes and we've started the micro grants again and we've distributed them, we can show like the work that was accomplished with that funding and like use that as a proposal to foundation funders, particularly in Europe, and like, say, hey, this is like what we've accomplished doing this, like, will you fund this for us instead? And so, that can be a strategy.
I'll add as well, that's part of the reason why I'm suggesting that we do some sort of like continentally coordinated or even like regionally coordinated project funds if we do it, just in the sense that I think it'll be a more effective pitch if you're trying to get a grant to be like, look at not only like, we gave out X amount of money and these are all our projects that were in this line. And I also think if you I'm going to make everyone dream with me for a minute. But if SSDP International's general operating costs became financially independent from SSDP Global, it would, I feel like our like financial separations, it would be nicer to have SSDP Global maybe giving funding grants for like projects as we make our way to financial independence. But I don't know, that might be also just a dream. But yeah.
Oops, I couldn't unmute. This is totally the space to dream. So we have around 30 minutes left from our scheduled time. So I would like to open up the floor for discussion. There's a hand up. There's a hand going.
There was a hand up just now. I think it was
from Chidi.
Should I invite him? Hey, Chidi, you are now on the panelists room, space. Anyway, we can hear you if you unmute yourself, hopefully.
Okay, great discussion from the panelists about getting funding. However, I would like to add to some of the discussion, to some of the topics raised as regard African funding. It is for African chapters, we can also raise funding ourselves if we're given the avenue to
Is it just me that is now not hearing anything? Okay.
Chidi, if you're speaking, we don't hear you.
That's sounding like something really interesting he started talking about. I'll mute and unmute. Okay, I'll get him back now.
Yeah, it might be like a connection issue.
Yeah, it's not even in the attendees list anymore.
Yeah, he's gone.
Okay, we'll get him back if he reconnects.
Questions, comments, ideas, dreams?
I want to talk about how we can empower the African network to raise those funds themselves. That's something that just I haven't even thought of myself. Okay, Clement.
I hope I'm loud and clear.
Yes.
Yeah. For me, I don't know, but I think this conversation we've had it like over and over again. But then, however, it doesn't always it doesn't paint to story retreat until something is done. So I hope we don't get bored listening to the same story again. We hope one day it'll be changed. So what I just wanted to add is, towards for instance, African self-funding, like raising funds on their own. I think that is how we should perceive things moving forward. And one of the ways that personally we have discovered is seeing how best we can empower our African chapters to first set up as an NGO, and like Rosine indicated, to organize an event alone, it's not easy. Like you need to book for places and all that, like just to put down, just to get all these things going. But then I realized once we're able to help our African chapters establish as an NGO, because most of them are not like campus based. And it's so obvious now because now COVID is in and schools are shut down for more than 9 months. And assuming that if it is just like campus based, then it means everyone would have despairs. But because we had kind of like this national leadership, so things are still a bit moving on, not really like big enough. But then, yeah. So the point is that if we can look at how best we can just support them to set up as an NGO, though there's going to be a financial commitment in it at the initial stage, but then the long-term impact is that at the end of the day, these chapters are going to be in that position to also attract like internal funds based on the activities that we are doing. For instance, SSDP Ghana, some time back, we were able to get funds, though we were not registered, but then we were able to get funds because some other philanthropists and other groups have seen what we've been doing. So yeah, oh, they've been doing all these things, so if they want this funding, they should be able to get it because they're going to use it for the right intentions. So assuming if we were established as an NGO, then you can just look at the positive light that is going to come up with. So that I think that is one of the surest way of ensuring that like we become self-independent. And as much as possible, I think always our focus is on seeing European funding or say American funding. But I realize that there are lots of philanthropy, there are lots of like organizations that want to fund activities in Africa. So if we could also like scout for some of these NGOs or individuals and connect them to our African chapters, probably Nigeria or Ghana or wherever, and link up with them and support them to applying, it's also going to be better. And one of the big issues that I think we've not taken recognized of is that, and I think Rosin, is the fact that it's not easy. It's not easy, for instance, for like some of our chapters to put things on paper, like you say, okay, go and bring your budget, like write down your proposal. Writing the proposal alone is a big issue. Like, I just want to be real. It's not easy for them to sit down and put that English together and write that proposal. I mean, the person would, if orally like this, I'll be able to tell that Rosin, I want to go to the slum areas. We are going to visit these people and we need that. But probably you would say, go and put it on a paper. I know the paper works so, but I think we should also see how best we can support some of them. If you have like, for instance, a dummy format of proposal that will be laid down already so that these chapters will use it as a guide to put in whatever that they have to put together and align them to go. Because once you tell them to go write the proposal and bring it, they see it as another bureaucratic process again. Who is going to do that work? And I've had that situation a couple of times that I had to always be the one putting together proposals because getting the ideas on board is difficult. So I have to make that. So if we could have like a dummy or like a general format of a proposal that whenever we hear of like grant opportunities, we could just give it out for them to just fill in or just put it together, then we submit so that things will be fast tracked. I think it's going to help us so well. So yeah, I think that's a little bit of it that I would just want to add to it. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for adding that. And also I want to read Isaac's comment from the chat because it's very related. So he said, it sounds like something I have in mind. The Africa Network should be trained on how to fundraise themselves or secure grants. We can't always depend on you guys. The international community can also help us foster a partnership with potential funders, like draft proposal on behalf of SSDP Network to organizations like OSF or so. Yeah, I think that's a very valid point. Like grant application processes are, I feel like tedious on purpose to kind of made you not want to do it. Like they make you submit like 100 pages of proof of what you have done. And yeah, that's just a lot of effort for everyone. And it takes a very special skill set, to be honest. Like grant writing is usually like a position itself within organizations.
Yeah, I'll add as well. I really would want to like help chapters be able to do stuff like register as NGOs. Like everyone hears me saying this, but like my long-term vision for where this movement is going is probably more of a coalition structure rather than like we've seen how top down has failed us. And like I just don't think it's realistic for it to be managed in the way that it is now. And I think, you know, as we grow and stuff like that, these are like the key things that we can help people with, like getting registered as an NGO, facilitating connections and helping people get to the fundraising like place or help people like fundraise and learn to fundraise. I think the bit that's always going to be hard for us, I think we can definitely do it, but it's going to take a long time because this is the first time SSDP International is even like beginning to learn this for the first time ourselves. And I think we should fight to be able to do this and be able to do it right. But I think we're gonna have to take it slow to at least some extent because we will like struggle a bit and trying to figure out. And I think like especially because the grants are so hard, but we can do it. Like I don't want to discourage it and I don't want to try to act like it's not gonna happen or anything like that. This is the direction I want to go in for the organization. And I think as well, when we have this new structure brought in where there's actual regional structures within like Africa and Europe, it'll be far easier for us to be able to actually do this sort of stuff because we're so separated out and it's so difficult for us to like communicate across the network and be able to say, you know, give that support and those formal trainings in that way. I think when we have this new structure in early next year, it'll be way easier for us to like even begin to address this sort of thing and be able to do, you know, set funding priorities for different regions. Like, do we want to fund NGOs? Like, how much do we want to fund for people registering as an NGO? Do we want to fund projects, et cetera, et cetera? Because those are the decisions that need to be made, and they more likely need to be made by the region rather than myself or anyone else. But yeah.
Yeah, just to add to what Clement, Isaac, and Roisin were saying, like even if it was the case that SSDP International could apply for grants for like a general budget for general operations, which isn't the case, but even if it were, we'd be running into questions of sustainability and just limited capacity to get money from the organization, and then also problems of equity and fairness and priorities when trying to put it top down. But the thing is, that's not the case, and so much money that is out there, at least from the last few months being on the fundraising team and trying to identify what even is out there. A lot of the opportunities are regional specific or project specific, and often both regional and project specific. But the flip side to that is, like Clement and what Isaac you were raising, is that it does give the opportunity to then, instead of trying to put the burden on a small team to find all the fundraising opportunities and to be able to submit all the grants themselves, and also basically have to pick what's more important based on what we apply for, we live in information, it would seem to make much more sense, especially in the global programs where many of the chapters are national chapters and or formally registered NGOs, to just do work with each other, to work with different so that people either for national chapters or in regional areas can apply for these grants directly with the assistance of people at SSDP International who have either identified these grants or know other people who have submitted grants or have tried to find grants for SSDP International itself, so that there's some transferred knowledge. But at the end of the day, there's a bit more of a team, like many more people actually working to find funds. Because as we talk about what's more sustainable, a model where many different actors are applying for different funds specifically for their regions and are talking to each other and are sharing resources with people trying to find grants and opportunities at the top. This is probably much more successful and much more sustainable than a small number of people trying to find grants for general operations, which might not even exist. So I think the idea, at least the intention to move towards regional based grants and for people to do it themselves in cooperation with other SSDP members around the world who have submitted successful applications, this will probably be much more successful in the long run. And just from what I've seen in terms of searching for opportunities, it seems most opportunities, most grants do tend to take a regional focus. So this might actually be the more appropriate way to go about it.
Yeah, just to say and be mindful of everybody's time or allocated time is up. But I'm happy to stay on and discuss more with all of you. Thank you, Jacob.
I see that Clement's hand is up. I don't know if it's from the previous one, but you have the floor.
Yeah, hello. Oh, so sorry, so sorry. Yeah.
I never muted you.
Yeah, sorry. I just wanted to add something a bit, and that is from my observation. I realized that like most people who fund drug policy related activities are, for instance, like people who are in the cannabis industry in Europe or like say in America because they are directly involved in, you know, the proceeds they use some to support the work that is going on that activists are doing. And I was kind of like wondering that, okay, so for instance, Ghana has kind of like legalized cannabis for medicinal use and all that. Is there a possibility of looking out for investors who are willing to come and say start like a cannabis business in Ghana? Once you have more of these people, then they would in turn support the work of activists here going on, because we are doing this like we are advocating for policy change. But then are we also taking advantage of the economic opportunities that comes with it when that comes with it in the country, like say Ghana that has legalized it? So I've been kind of like brainstorming how best I can like look out for say investors who would be willing to, you know, so that then when they are here, then they can support activists and not always depend on, you know, this is a very huge topic, but I think we can break it down further sometime. But thank you.
Oh, if I could just respond to what Clement just said. I'm really happy to help provide coaching to people who want to speak to cannabis investors and entrepreneurs in their countries for like any advice on like how to ask, how to develop those relationships, and like, you know, as the cannabis industry expands globally, you know, they are many of them are like very committed to the mission of ending cannabis prohibition, also just ending the war on drugs. And like as it expands, like that is a great place to tap into. And I'm like super happy to provide any coaching or any advice on building those relationships.
Perfect. I think I would definitely find time and link up Rachel so that I mean we start some of these business here and they can support activists with some little of their proceeds. I'll link up.
Great.
Yeah, that's super cool, Rachel. Yeah, I'm trying to like sum up kind of our recommendations from this session or like action items. A lot of it sounds like, you know, training and empowering our members to do this work themselves. And I do feel like that's gonna get us closer to sustainability. Yeah, I'm doing a very bad job of summing things up. So if anybody wants to help me, that would be greatly appreciated.
No, I think you did a good job because we wanted to have like action items in the end, but the conversation went into like I guess less mechanical direction, which was a lot more enjoyable. And I think from my side, it was just really useful to have people who have clear ideas about how their work would have been helped, and then have Rachel and Jake on the other, also Rasheen on the other, and be like, yeah, we thought about that. It is kind of doable. This is how I can support you. And of course, it's just the beginning of like a larger chunk of work, but it's just really refreshing to see the commitment on both sides.
Yeah, I agree.
But I would ask everyone especially the panelists, and Chidi, Evelyn, and Clement, and whoever else had the floor to look through the notes because you guys were talking a lot. So I just want to make sure that I captured everything that needs to be forwarded to the writing committee, action plan writing committee. So I tried my best, but if you have a second to read through, it's 4 pages, just make sure that I haven't missed anything important or the point that you were trying to make is really recorded there, because the point of this session is to hear you guys out. So I want to make sure that it happens.
Yeah, Jacob, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say if I could take a stab at trying to summarize some of our main points here. So it seemed from what we talked about from the beginning of IIF and to where we are now, that everyone really likes the idea of the micro grant projects, that having funds for micro grants, because it can be specific, reasonable, and potentially part of an overall objective for the organization. And right now we have some funds, since SSDP International is still being funded by SSDP Global. And so this is kind of the case now that we like this model and we still have this sort of money available. But moving forward, as we move towards hopefully financial independence, and based on the types of grants that might be available, a more sustainable thing to do in the long run is, in addition to whatever money we can find and source for continuing micro grants or institutional funds to be decided, however, it will be reasonable to start thinking towards regional funding, regional grants, and working towards a network-based model where we're sharing knowledge and empowering SSDP members in different areas to apply for funds themselves. So this is like kind of where we are now and where we'd like to be. And this is all subject to how the next few years go and our own success with finding grants and what is available. But this seems to be, to me, that's how the session seemed summarized.
Thank you so much for that, Jacob. That was, I think, very, very great. And yeah, I don't have anything to add to that. I just want to say thank you for joining us and for having this conversation. And I'm very excited to keep continuing to have these conversations with you as we shape our programming to serve our members. So yeah, I don't have anything more to add, but if anybody has, feel free to do that.
Say a special thank you to our members from the African Network who've been screaming this into the void for years and years and years. Because I know it is particularly frustrating and annoying when there's like no answer to any of these questions and it just keeps going in circles, or the answer is just no and there's no like offer for being involved in changing that. So I really appreciate all of you for being here, and I'm hoping that today is the day that we actually are genuinely making this difference, and this will be the actual change we'll see, and within hopefully a couple of years that we actually get to real results.
I too just want to shout out like Rachel and Luis and all the current staff members in SSDP for like taking this seriously and responding. It was like really one of the most frustrating things when I was on staff was that this was just such a central problem that was not being heard by anyone besides me really on staff. And it was really, really frustrating. So just like hearing this conversation and hearing what you guys are doing and like that this is like even being discussed is just such a huge deal. So serious kudos and thank you for that.
Yeah, just seconding that. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you. Yeah, thank you, everybody. I think it was super fun. Or Clement, were you trying to say something?
No, not at all. Like, I was just nodding my head, trying to everything that Roseanne is saying, because, like, she knows it already. Like, we get it's always the same story. We just want to see change so that we can get back on our feet. Money is discouraging us. It's making us lose motivation. I mean, let's get the money. Sorry.
Money talks, man. What can you do?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, thank all of you for all of the really hard and awesome work you do. Like I am very deeply sorry that your need for project funding has just been so like just ignored and not taken seriously when like, you know, you folks are like, you know, this is the rest of the world doing drug policy reform. It's like, we need to provide you these resources to make these changes. Like you're doing the absolute, like the best work. And like, we owe it to our members in the global South to support them financially. Like that is like more equitable, right? Like we owe it to you folks because like there's those kinds of financial resources are just not as available in the global South. And so like you're doing some of the most important work. And like, I recognize that. And like, I really am like deeply appreciative of your work. And like, it's very motivating to me to be able to make these changes and support you folks. So thank you for all you do.
I just want to read Luis's comment from the chat. This just seems like the least we can do to support an incredible and massive part of the network, which I completely agree that the African network is just amazing. I'm getting emotional, so.
I know. It's what it is.
It is what it is. No,
This
I'm
week's
seriously
been too
super excited.
sentimental. We've been,
Yeah.
this is like the 4th time I've been close to tears at the end of a call this week. We need to stop. We need to cut this out, okay?
I was gonna say this week is emotional.
This week is emotional. Yeah. Yeah.
All right, I am going to stop recording now.
Yeah. Thank you everybody for attending. Thank you to the panelists. Thank you so much for all that you do.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Peace.
See everyone.